Now, our next talk will be on integrated load planning algorithm for outbound logistics at Webb, and it will be given by Burcu Keskin from the University of Alabama.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. Today I'll be talking about the outbound logistics of Webb, and in particular how we improve their load planning and dispatches using operations research. Before we continue further with my talk, I would like to thank the judges for selecting our entry as one of the finalists. It's such an honor to be part of such a select group of researchers. And here's a brief outline of my talk. I'll first talk about the company overview, and I'll talk about the specific problem that we are facing, the challenges and constraints, and what made us motivated to take on this particular challenge. And then I'll talk about our solution methodology and specific OR applications. And then finally, we will compare our analysis with the current practice of WebVL and provide some benchmarking results. I'll show you some snippets from our decision support tool, and I'll conclude with some brief comments from our project and implementation challenges. WebVL, headquartered in Cullman, Alabama, is actually a manufacturer of brake drums, hubs, spoke wheels, and road horse, and these type of products are typically quite large in nature, about 18 inches by 8 inches, and heavy in nature as well, ranging from 60 pounds to 120 pounds. And these products, WebVL typically serves aftermarket products. WebVL has two plants located, one in Cullman, Alabama, and another one in Siloam Springs, Arkansas. And currently, Cullman, Alabama plant serves customers coming from east of Mississippi, and the Siloam Springs plant serves the customers coming from west of Mississippi. And WebVL actually has quite a bit of a geographically dispersed customer base with more than 4,500 customers coming from around 2,400 unique zip codes. And for our project purposes, WebVL provided us with 4 months of their data. And in our data, we had more than 23 orders with more than 10,000 line items placed in those orders. And this was actually, in fact, a low season for their business. WebVL strives for excellence in every aspect of their business, but especially in outbound logistics because it's a critical component of their business. And the problem they're facing is with regards to their outbound load planning and dispatching. WebVL observes new orders coming to them every day to be fulfilled within a short time frame. And the main challenge with this particular aspect is that they do not have, because they're an aftermarket unit, they do not know when their next order is coming from, for what products, and in what size. And this incomplete information provides them quite a challenge. And given the inventory availability, the loads are built daily and released based on various criteria, including truck utilization and due date considerations. And because the orders are large and they have inventory issues, orders can be split into multiple loads and using different transportation modes as well. And loads, once they are ready, they can be shipped using common carriers and railroads using one of the 3 transportation modes, including truckloads, LTLs, less than truckloads, as well as intermodal containers. And each transportation mode presents their own unique set of challenges and with their own unique cost structure. And with all of these unique characteristics, our problem is actually a multi-item, multi-mode, heterogeneous vehicle routing problem with split delivery, incomplete information, and other practical considerations. And currently, there is no off-the-shelf software that tackles this problem. And in fact, there is no other academic work in the literature that addresses the challenges that are combined in this particular problem. So our goal is to actually develop an efficient loading and routing problem optimization models so that we can satisfy customer demand in a cost-effective way while at the same time achieving higher truck utilizations and route efficiencies. And to be able to do that, we actually build an integrated model that builds the loads and dispatches them using one of the 3 transportation modes. And our dispatching rules are based on either weight-based utilization or route-based utilization or penalties, which brings me to my next slide. I'll talk about that a little bit. Dispatch policy seems to play a critical role in our analysis. And the first dispatch policy we consider is a truck utilization. And truck utilization is common knowledge to both academicians as well as practitioners. And it's essentially the percentage of the total weight in a load in a truck to its capacity. And everybody knows that it's better to cube out or weight out a particular truck. Route utilization, on the other hand, is a novel measure we actually developed ourselves, and as opposed to truck utilization that measures the utilization of the load of the truck at the departure of the warehouse, route utilization measures the truck utilization throughout the whole route. And in essence, it provides a percentage of total weighted distance to total ton miles purchased in a route. And again, it's because Webb is using purchased common carriers. It's an important measure for them because they're paying essentially every ton mile they are buying from the common carriers. And you might ask, does it make a difference? We've been using truck utilization, which is a new big deal about the route utilization. And we did actually do a sample test with regards to a sample part of our data. And we did find out that it does make a difference with regards to the bottom line of cost. And here I present the results with regards to cost per pound. And the red dots are for truck utilization. And even in the best truck utilization, which was found around 90 to 95%, our cost per pound was about around 5 cents. And with the worst route utilization performance, which was around 50%, we were doing better than the best truck utilization. And in the best route utilization case, which was around 85, 90%, we were providing about 20% savings. So it does make a difference. In addition, we actually wanted to tighten the route utilization a little bit more by attaching it to a cost figure, because we have found out that sometimes a cheaper route might have low truck utilization, route utilization, but it doesn't make, too much sense because it's already a cheap route. On the other hand, for more expensive routes, you really would like them to be highly efficient, both in terms of truck utilization as well as route utilization, I guess, because you're purchasing those ton miles. So we essentially came up with this penalty measure that ties the route utilization of a route to its cost. And we also use this penalty measure while deciding to dispatch the routes. So what's happening in Webb current practice? Webb observes these orders coming in, and I'm going to show you the plant in Coleman for now. And on the first day, Webb observes 2 orders coming in, one from Clarksville, Tennessee, another one from Cincinnati, Ohio. And the planner works manually and selects the farthest away order as an anchor point and tries to build a straight enough route to that farthest point and comes up with this particular route. In this case, both of these orders are half a truckload. So this particular route actually is 100% utilized. In Webb's mind, it's a good route, straight route, 100% utilized. Let's dispatch this. The next day, 2 new orders arrive, one from Nashville, Tennessee, and another one from Columbus, Ohio. Following the similar procedure, Webb planner dispatches again a similar route. On the other hand, our algorithm, observing similar information in the same order, on the first day builds the exact same route as Webb, but it doesn't dispatch it because we found that the route utilization is not as high enough as what is desired, and the penalties are higher than, again, the critical cutoff levels. So we held back the first route, and the next day we actually built 2 routes. And in this case, we can see that these routes are slightly better than the first ones that I presented for Webb. Now the new truck route utilizations are over 85%, with penalties quite considerably smaller. And more importantly, it has a huge impact in terms of the bottom line of the whole operations, that we were able to save about $750, 30% of the route costs, as well as in terms of the distance saved, we were again close to 30% of distance saved. So that brings me to our benefits. Right now, there is no off-the-shelf software to tackle this problem, and employees are manually building these routes on for a challenging problem. Our tool, as I'll mention in a little bit, rations the limited inventory very efficiently over critical orders and help dispatch them with regards to being really on time with regards to their shipments. And our tool provides an opportunity to evaluate three different transportation modes in terms of costs, capacities, as well as other specific transportation mode restrictions. Now, finally, when we build the routes, we actually report the truck utilization as well as route utilization as well as the penalty of these routes, which are essentially new measures for the goodness of fit for a particular route. So that brings me to our overall approach. We have a graphical user interface, and the graphical user interface is used both as a data repository, way to connect to the optimizer as well as a reporting tool. And in terms of the data, we need customer orders with regards to their locations, type of products they required, and their promised dates. And this is coming from sales. We require inventory coming from manufacturing system. And then we send all of these data into our optimization module, which essentially decomposes the problem into two sub-problems, one assignment problem and one routing problem. So in our solution approach, we kind of refer to this cluster first, route second type of heuristic approach, which is quite common in the vehicle routing literature. And once all it's done and all the routes are decided and which ones are going to be dispatched, the graphical user interface provides the necessary reporting for the planners. So let's talk a little bit about the details of our optimization algorithm. Our assignment problem is actually an extension of the location-based heuristic introduced by Bramall and Simchi-Levy in 1995. And the main idea is that we would like to form clusters for each one of the transportation modes in such a smart way that's based on some approximate costs. So, for instance, here we might have like a truckload cluster, and I pick a particular location to be the center of the cluster. And then I would like to assign additional customer orders to this particular truckload so that I will have essentially the desired truck utilization, route utilization, and efficiency. And in terms of how we come up with these costs, we have this particular fixed charge type of cost function for our assignment problem. And the fixed costs are coming from essentially the seed cost. Establishing a cluster is costly. And then the assignment cost, like what is the additional cost of including an order for this particular cluster. So for each one type of the different transportation modes, we have specific clustering costs as well as the assignment costs. For instance, for trucking, we have to incorporate the minimum charge for trucking companies as well as the rate of that particular cluster location and the surcharge rate that's changing on a weekly basis. And if the surcharge times distance to that cluster location is surcharge plus the mileage rate times the distance for that particular location is greater than the minimum charge, we use that. Otherwise, we use a different formula just based on surcharge and the minimum charge. And then we here have what would be the additional cost of incorporating one more load into this particular tracking system. For containers, we have a different cost structure. With containers, we'll be using intermodal ramps, and we have the fixed cost of using an intermodal ramp here. And every time we add another load, another drop, we have essentially a drop charge from the ramp to that particular customer. With LTLs, we can only have LTLs for one customer order, so we have an assignment cost of 0. No other assignment can be essentially consolidated into an LTL. And for the seat cost of an LTL, it essentially is a complicated piece-bus function that depends on the weight of that particular order as well as the distance of that order from the plant. So, what are the specific challenges that we face in this problem? We have faced some transportation-related challenges as well as inventory-related challenges. In terms of trucks, our truck route costs depend on the mileage rate of the last location. And this is a restriction coming from the trucking industry. The main challenge for us is that it actually makes our vehicle routing problem quadratic optimization problem. The second challenge we are facing is as the industry people call it, is the hook. For some places, especially in this case, we are showing the New York Island, trucking companies state the last drop location because they're really high in terms of the transportation rates, and it's harder for them to come up with backhaul options, and they force the web wheel to finish their orders at that particular location. So specifically, in the case of the New York Island is very expensive, whereas all of the other surrounding places, including New Jersey, is much cheaper in terms of the routing rate. And our algorithm always obviously drops the thing in New Jersey, forming a route, forming a hook. And trucking companies essentially called us on that and say that you cannot do that. And that whenever there's an order that goes to New York Island area, it needs to end in New York Island area, and you need to incur the high toll costs and bridges. So our assignment problem essentially helps us tackle this particular issue. And then finally, our trucks are capacitated, and we have to oblige to the capacity limitations. In terms of containers, in addition to the capacity issue, we have an additional challenge, is that the service time from the lamp location to essentially servicing all of these drops added to that particular load needs to be finished within a certain duration. The issue is that when we solve the assignment problem and we are essentially assigning loads to a particular transportation mode, we do not know the routes. And because we do not know the route, we cannot really estimate the exact service time. So in order to get away with that, we essentially come up with a star distance method that kind of approximates that particular route cost. Even though star distance definitely overcharges in terms of that particular time, it helps us send feasible clusters to the routing problem, and it was a bigger issue for them. And again, in terms of LTLs, we have minimum charge, and then piecewise linear cost function was a pleasure to work with. And we have inventory-related constraints, and one of them was essentially related to rationing the limited inventory, which I'll be talking in detail next. So today we're in October 7, and WebWheel deems all the orders that will be due in the next 3 days as critical, and all the other orders as regular orders. And say that today we have some limited inventory, in this case only 3 items, and we have one customer that's actually not so critical. Its due date is not happening until October 25th. It demands 3 units, and we have 3 units. We can allocate all of our inventory to this particular customer. If we have another customer that's critical and that's going to be due sooner than that customer, we can essentially ration the inventory to all of that particular inventory to this particular customer. If we have another customer, a third customer, who's also critical and whose due date is actually sooner than our second customer, may not get any inventory, because in WebWheel case, both of these customers are critical. That's how we define the critical customers. Or the tool may actually ration the inventory and give 1 unit of inventory to customer 3 and keep the other 2 for customer 2 if it is cost effective, based on our analysis. So at the solution of the assignment problem, we have this particular picture with clusters and orders assigned to it, and this information is fed into the routing problem. And we have a drop sequence determined using a modified traveling salesman step traveling salesman problem. And in this case, it's a quadratic formulation, as I mentioned, because the whole route rate is determined by the mileage rate of the last location. In our solution approach, we do not solve the quadratic version. We actually parameterize the last location and solve NTSP problems, because the number of drops in our routes were reasonably manageable, and it was much faster for us to solve NTSPs as opposed to the quadratic one. So once all it is done, an assignment problem and a routing problem are solved, all of the open orders are assigned to a particular route, given a particular transportation mode. But obviously not every route may be so efficient. So we have to essentially evaluate which ones should be sent and which ones should be held back. And for that purpose, we use 2 different dispatch rules. The first rule uses a combination of truck utilization and route utilization. And we dispatch a route if it is route utilization is greater than a cutoff, and truck utilization is greater than a cutoff with regards to the truck utilization. We realize that this rule sometimes could be very restrictive because it's an end statement, and it might be so good with regards to truck utilization and maybe barely below that particular cutoff. So we came up with this second aggregate rule that kind of takes care of some of those issues. If it doesn't fit any one of these rules, we do not dispatch and hold the hold the route for further consolidation opportunities. And then we have a second dispatch rule, and this is the penalty-based dispatch. If the penalty of that particular route is less than the penalty cutoff, then we go ahead and dispatch the route. Otherwise, we do not dispatch the route. So now the problem happens is that we decide to hold back some routes, and there was a critical order in one of those routes. What do we do? Especially if there's a late order of an order that's about to be due, we have to evaluate two options. Do I let go an inefficient route, or do I dispatch this particular about to be late order via an LTL option, because they don't want to be late? And for that purpose, we came up two comparison methods. One of them is a direct cost comparison, comparing the cost of LTL versus cost of shipping that particular truck. And then we also, wanted to normalize it with regards to the number of pounds in each one of those shipments, so that we can evaluate them on an apples-to-apples basis. And in our analysis, we found out that cost per pound always gave us better comparison, and we essentially used that to handle the late orders. So that brings me to our results. After we have done all of these analyses, we have realized that we actually did not save any money. It was quite a heartbroken moment for me. After I got over my feelings, I started digging deep into their results. And I was like, okay, we're shipping almost the same amount of weight, and we're shipping in less number of shipments, and we're less late than them. And how are we not saving more money? And that's the moment of truth. We realized that they were actually not obeying some of the constraints that made us obey, and they were using a softer version of what we were solving. But when we essentially relaxed the problem as much as their violations, our problems started taking essentially to the extreme, and we were essentially fully utilizing all that extreme capacity. So we had to kind of find a middle ground. Can I relax the capacity just a little bit, just nudge the due date a little bit, and then we were able to show some savings. And then we further on go on to analyzing where these savings are coming from. Are they coming from the capacity relaxation, or are they coming from the due date relaxation? And we found out that due date relaxation seemed to have the bigger impact in terms of the relaxation. Again, not wanting to be late with regards to a customer order was one of the main drivers, and that they didn't want to incur additional LTL cost. And in fact, when we look into the cost split with regards to different transportation modes, that was essentially one of the main outcomes of our algorithm, both in the constrained version as well as in the relaxed version, that we were better handling how we are handling the LTLs, even though we were doing about the same in terms of the container and trucks, but we were building the routes more efficiently to be able to avoid LTL shipments. So for Siloam Springs plant, we have very similar results, except we were able to show savings even with the relaxed model, and we knew that they were already, okay, I'm not going to say cheating, but they were already, using a softer model, so that was quite a proud moment. And when we essentially relaxed the model, we were able to show savings all the way up to 5%, which was huge for their practice, because they're working with low-margin products, and this was a low season for them. And there were two main differences for Siloam Springs and Common, is that Siloam Springs serves a larger but less populated area, so it was actually harder for the manual planner to come up with really efficient routes. And on the other hand, number of orders coming from Common was much larger than Siloam Springs, and again, it was kind of lending itself to further consolidation opportunities that can be easily identified via manual operations. So these are some of the breakdown reports from our decision support tool. After all it is done, you can see that this is essentially a route breakdown, reports the route cost, miles spent, total weight in that particular route. Truck utilization for this particular route was 100%. Route efficiency was 67%. And we had a number of drops. And as you can see, I don't have a route 2, because route 2 was deemed inefficient and wasn't even reported, even though it was formed. And then furthermore, for a particular route, you can in fact get this detailed load breakdown, and you can see essentially how, for a particular drop, which line items are included, and if there are still any quantity that needs to be shipped, and it kind of gives them an idea with regards to how the orders are split and how they can handle that. So some of the lessons learned from the industry and academia collaboration is that that in order to be able to come up with an effective project implementation, I'm going to refer to the quote by Jerry Allen from his keynote speech in 2013 Informs Analytics Conference. He mentioned that effectiveness of a project has two dimensions: the quality of the solution that comes from the researchers, as well as the acceptance of that solution that comes from the practitioners and who is going to implement it. And we saw that that was very much the case for us. That as we strive to, work on this area, and whenever we ignored that there are specific constraints, we were kind of falling behind. We found out that there was actually another component of this project that was the communication, that we essentially had to ask them so many different questions and found out that they were omitting to tell us some of the critical constraints, not intentionally, but just because they didn't know about our type modeling. When we started the project, we were thinking that collection of the data and obtaining data in a clean way was going to be one of the biggest challenges. That turned out to be not so true. And we realized that actually defining the scope of the problem, defining the real constraints of the problem, and how to essentially incorporate them into our model and communicate it back to the practitioners, why it is important, why when they forget to tell us, the whole solution changes, is a bigger issue. And I hope that we kind of were able to, solve that problem via continuous communication. So what is the current picture? Webb implemented our tool in January 2013, and they still continue to use our tool. As of 2 weeks ago, we received this nice email that essentially says that they actually reported on average of 4.4% savings in their outbound logistics cost, which shows that essentially our benchmark analysis was somewhat lower with regards to what the actual results could be. And it was quite a highlight of our day and one of the proudest moments since the completion of our project to receive this particular email. So in terms of the summary of the problem, we actually developed a two-stage heuristic to determine these daily load planning and routing decisions for Webb. And we came up with new route measures, including route utilization as well as penalty-based dispatches, which we found out to be quite useful and cost-effective for Webb. And we know that heuristic provides good quality solutions, but we also found out that the quality of the solutions are dependent on a number of critical factors related to the geographical distribution of orders, order consolidation opportunities, deadline restrictions, and how hard they are on those deadline restrictions, and inventory availability. Webb would like to continue to work with us for further operational excellence, and there are two main projects we might tackle in the near future. That one of them is related to essentially an improvement heuristic in terms of how to handle those late orders, as it seems to be one of the main drivers of the cost. And the another one is that I mentioned currently whenever orders come in, they have this geographical spread of east of Mississippi versus west of Mississippi to those plants. It would be much better to have this centralized order allocation system for further consolidation opportunities. I mean, to us as OR people, it seems like a no-brainer, but they had that culture of doing it for like that 20 years, and like, how do we do that? And I'm like, not so difficult. But again, it kind of goes back to quality versus acceptance. Whatever is something easy for them, it could be difficult for them, or vice versa. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions if you have any.